Good morning, everyone. Please join in our gathering hymn, At the Table. Good morning and welcome everyone to worship at First Unitarian Church. We're located here in Portland, Oregon, and our mission is to nurture the individual spirit and together to work towards the beloved community. Welcome on this Homecoming Sunday and to the beginning of a new church year. Earlier this morning, our weekly family service returned at 10 a.m., and as you know, if you made it here this morning, this sanctuary service will now be at 11 a.m. on Sundays. So welcome to this new service time. And speaking of much beloved things returning, in a bit you will get to hear our choir singing once again. Our choirs have been one of the things many of us have missed the most in these pandemic days. What a blessing our quartet has been, and what a blessing to have our choir back, albeit by video. Now, when you see the video in a bit, you may be asking, where exactly are they coming from? Our choirs are going to be rehearsing and recording from First Congregational Church and First Presbyterian Church for a time this year. Those neighboring congregations have sanctuaries that make it easier to more safely space out our singers, as well as being spaces that are easier to record in. We are grateful to these churches for their partnership and for their welcome. Also this morning, we welcome Issa Stemler, who will be our substitute pianist for a few weeks, while our staff pianist, Signe Lusk, is on leave for some necessary surgery. Signe's surgery is currently scheduled for this coming week, and we offer her our prayers for a successful surgery and for a speedy recovery. After the service, you are invited to join fellow congregants for a virtual social hour. You'll see a QR code after the service that will get you there. And as we regather this church year, a couple reminders about the things that can feed your spirit. Our weekly Vespers service will resume this coming Friday at 5 o'clock. This is a service offered by our lay ministers and makes a space for reflection with readings, music, and meditation at the end of the week. And a week from tomorrow, on Monday, September 20th, our evening loving kindness meditation will resume. Join fellow congregants for this meditation to begin your week. You can sign up for both of these services on the church website under event registration. Once again, welcome everyone. It is so good to be together. The Morris family will light our chalice this morning, and I invite you to light a chalice now at home if you have one. We are Unitarian Universalists.
We light this chalice in faith, in hope, and in love.
We thought there was some finish line we were about to cross, that we were about to emerge not into the world we left 18 months ago, but into a world that welcomed us without masks, in which we could feel held not only by that larger love, but by the arms of all those we love. We were ready to declare ourselves survivors. We come today with the finish line still in the distance, forced back onto the only question we can ever answer: how will we live today? We gather in this virtual space once more for a homecoming of the Spirit, knowing that in the world, the modest progress toward beloved community is in danger of being rolled back. We come to rekindle our commitment and to affirm the covenant in which we live, the promises we make and break, the hope that lifts our spirits, the faith that calls us still to live grounded in the love that will not let us go, to live in the love that we make real together. Come now, and let us worship gathered once again, gathered together in worship once more. Our homecoming litany is inspired by Kathleen McTeague's poem, "This Place is Sanctuary." Your part is to join those of us here on the chancel in the sung response after each stanza that I read. You'll get the hang of it right away. Brokenhearted, who woke up today with the winds of despair whistling through your mind, come in. Come in, come in, come in, come in. You who are brave but wounded, limping through life and hurting with every step, come in. Come in, come in, come in, come in. You who are fearful, who live with shadows hovering over your shoulders, come in. Come in, come in, come in, come in. This place is sanctuary, and it is for you. You who are filled with happiness, whose abundance overflows, come in. Come in, come in, come in, come in. You who walk through the world with lightness and grace, who awoke this morning with strength and hope, you who have everything to give, come in. Come in, come in, come in, come in. This place is your calling, a riverbank to channel the sweet waters of your life, the place where you are called by the world's need. Come in. Come in, come in, come in, come in. Here we offer in love. Here we receive in gratitude. Here we make a circle from the great gifts of breath, attention, and purpose. Come in. Come in, come in, come in, come in. Love is the doctrine of this church, and though our welcome has to be at a distance, we hope that you will come in. Let's join now in singing our doxology, Spirit of Life. As we begin this church year and reflect on the theme of covenant, the promises and commitments that bind us, it is important to begin by centering on what is most important, by remembering what means most to us in our life together. Congregant Julia Griffiths has agreed to offer her own testimony for us this morning.
Hello. Recently, two ideas have grabbed my heart and my mind. And as Rilke advised, and we've heard from the pulpit many times, I've tried to live the questions to see if they come together, because in my heart, I knew that they could. And because I'm Unitarian Universalist, and because I've attended this church since childhood, they came together for me in a particular way. One idea came to me during this time through online anti-racism work by Thea Monnier and Ebony Janice Moore, and it's the idea that we belong to each other. We belong to each other. I grew up and lived in circumstances that proclaimed the go, 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 do, 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 best, 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 urgent, urgent, urgent way of thinking. And while that was happening, I and those around me knew that it wasn't healthy, that it needed to change, to focus on being instead of doing. But for whatever reason, I thought the doing was a human drive and the work to set it aside was an individual discipline. Until I heard their conversation, that's when I understood finally this isn't innate to being human. And that one way to see its root is to look at the fear of not earning our place, of not earning our belonging. But no. We belong to each other, all of us, universally. The second idea came from Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is the idea that the earth loves us. Look at all the ways she shows us. Rain and sun and mountains and peaches. The earth is constantly, creatively loving on us. We need only look. And that love is healing. Kimmerer tells of the earth healing itself and creatures like us time and again. So I reached this summer with these two ideas and a call to bring them together. We belong to each other, and the earth loves us. We've forgotten that we belong to each other, and that separation is hurting us. How can we heal ourselves through the earth's ever-present love? Walking in the woods not long ago, they came together. Expand the we beyond human beings. Expand the we to all. Rain and sun and mountains and peaches. Birds and butterflies and bears and beaches, of course. So simple. Heard the idea so many times in our pulpit and elsewhere. These ideas aren't through with me yet. The 8th principle work resonates so much with we belong to each other. These ideas are leading me on, and new ideas are joining, and because I'm Unitarian Universalist, raised and growing in our congregation, I receive them with my head and my heart. I am so blessed. We are such blessings to each other. We belong to each other.
Each week in our service at First Unitarian Church, we share our offering with an organization whose mission is aligned with our own. As we begin a new church year, we will be focusing this giving on climate justice initiatives, from disaster recovery and mitigation to innovative solutions that center and give power to frontline communities most adversely affected by our climate crisis. The work of climate justice acknowledges that extractive systems of colonialism, imperialism, and racism are the drivers of climate change, and they disproportionately impact Indigenous, Black, and Brown, and poor communities first. A climate justice approach acknowledges that these communities are vulnerable to the impacts of climate catastrophes and prioritizes solutions that center the health and economic interests of these communities. This approach yields outcomes that are good for ecosystems, good for the people, and good for the planet. These shared offerings throughout the year will support climate justice organizations so we may build a just transition away from fossil fuels and other extractive industries. For this morning and throughout the month of September, we will share our plate with the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy, or GCCLP. Specifically, this money will go to support their disaster relief fund. These funds will go directly to frontline communities in the Gulf South being impacted by climate disasters. GCCLP works with local leaders who have committed to transparency and accountability, supporting these communities to practice self-governance and self-determination. This is part of GCCLP's larger mission of advancing structural shifts toward climate justice through social, economic, and political systems. Your generous giving is deeply appreciated. To share your offering this morning, you may click the Donate Now button in Boxcast or use the QR code that will soon appear on your screen. Thank you.
We make a space each week in our service to bring the concerns of our community life together. A reminder that you can send prayer requests in to be held by our ministers and our lay ministers through the week. Send those to prayer@firstunitarianportland.org. And if you have a concern you'd like mentioned here in the service, please send it to parishconcerns@firstunitarianportland.org. Longtime member Pat McLean died on August the 27th, just shy of her 92nd birthday. Pat died of COVID-19 as well as from complications from diabetes. Pat served as our wedding coordinator here at the church for a number of years. She was also very involved in our alliance. Pat leaves 3 children, 6 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren, and we hold her family at this time of loss. John Cobb Cooper III died peacefully at home here in Portland on Tuesday, just shy of his 100th birthday. He spent his last days surrounded by his family, which includes longtime members John, Zaida, and Sonrisa Cooper. John was a World War II veteran, and he lived a long and fulfilling life, and his family and friends will miss him dearly. We hold the Cooper family in our thoughts and prayers at this time. Will you pray with me now? Spirit of life and of love, God of many names and of no name, be with us this day. We begin in gratitude, Spirit, as we gather on this new day, in this new year, as a community. In our coming together, albeit virtual, remind us that we are not alone, that together we are something more than the sum of our individual selves. And remind us, Spirit, of those who have gone before us, our ancestors, and all that we inherit. Remind us that they, too, are with us. Hold us as we carry on with their work, with so much still to do. May this community we nurture and sustain together be a place for us to bring the whole of our lives, our gratitude for all that is our life, our fears about what our lives and what our children's lives may be, anger and rage as we bear witness to injustice, grief and sadness when we look upon so much that has been lost already, but also curiosity about what too is possible, open hearts and ready hands to do the work, sometimes the hard work of creating that community we call beloved. We are in these days of awe that offer an invitation to begin again, that invite us to make a turn. Help us to say yes. Help us in our forgiving. Help us in our striving. Help us, Spirit, to know hope. Help us, Spirit, to live in love. On this new day, in this new year, may that be so. Amen. Let's take a few moments now to be together in silence. Let's join together now in singing Ubi Caritas.
Our reading this morning is titled Show Up Hungry. It is written by the Reverend Elizabeth Wynn. I got off work at 7 p.m. and did the thing where you chase the bus a little bit and then realize you won't make it, so you walk to the bus stop. I'm already an hour late to Sunday night singing at the Lucy Stone Cooperative, a UU affordable housing co-op in Boston. I'm still ambivalent. I could go home to Netflix and grilled cheese. I could choose predictability and warm carbs. Or I could get on the bus to this community where I was first a member of the planning team and now I serve as a board member. This place where, despite my leadership role, I still find myself questioning whether and how I belong. I give myself a little pep talk, reminding myself that I am allowed to show up late and hungry and in need of a song. Reminding myself that being in community means offering care and being cared for. It means bringing my shiny self and my not so shiny self. When I arrive, there's a teapot of hot water and a plate of fat dates on the table. A friend presses a bowl into my hands and there's broccoli soup. We sing Amazing Grace. The wonders of accepting love have made me whole and real. Community is covenant. It's the promise of a bowl of soup and a song at the end of the day. Laid bare, it is the succor and accountability of doing that thing together that we cannot do alone. I've not always been my best self in the communities I've loved. I've skirted dish duty at Lucy Stone, and I've missed weddings in my hometown. I've dropped out when I was needed and showed up full of pettiness and exhaustion. The wonder of accepting love is only made evident when we are allowed to shed the shiny and let the sourness show. Our communities of spirit are only real because we show up late expecting to be fed, because we both give and get, because we bring our tart and our sweet, our gifts and our struggles. We need the lemon in the lentils, rice vinegar in the sushi, a squeeze of lime in the chilada, and some acid in our communities. Without it, our communities are superficial. With no acid, we are one note, monotone. Our vulnerabilities, our bits of brokenness, bring life to our relationships. We are a part of community when we show up shiny and not so shiny, when we label soup into each other's bowls and eat eagerly, when we bring our sour and our sweet, when we shed the shiny and show up hungry.
safe and secure from all alarms, leaning on those everlasting arms. The everlasting arms, safety, security. That pastoral promise touches deep into hearts that yearn for comfort. Oh, we want change too, or at least we say we do, but we resist change as well. Our hearts wonder what can be relied on when we know that change will come, that change must come. When we are weary and worried, when we have had a hard time trusting that those arms are really open in welcome for us. But I wonder, is it really comfort that we yearn for, or is that simply our weariness speaking? Elizabeth Wynn, in the reading that Carter shared, wrote about the succor and the accountability of being in community, of doing that thing that we cannot do alone. The succor, the intentional giving and receiving of comfort and support, welcome embodied in a bowl of soup or a plate of fat dates on the table. But not succor, not comfort alone. Succor and accountability, the living out of and into our responsibility for ourselves in relationship with others, the grounding of our lives in the ties that bind. The comfort and the accountability of living our covenant. Covenant is our spiritual theme this month, and we often think of covenant as the words of covenant, the words we say, as promises that we speak. But our covenant is far more than words. Those promises are lived in our relationships and in the decisions that we make every day. Our covenant is lived before it is spoken. The words of covenant, to quote Rebecca Parker, are the icing on the cake. They are not the cake itself. As we regather amid so much change, it feels like we need to at least revisit and renew our covenant, confirm that dreams for beloved community still stir us, that our commitments to get free, all of us get free, still call us forward, to make sure that those promises and commitments are permanent and not passing, that the hope that is at the heart of this faith, that hope abides. Now, those everlasting arms are there. The love that has never broken faith with us is still ready to partner with us. The question is whether we are still ready to partner with that love, to make that love real in our world. That's what we need to get clear about. Welcome home. Welcome home to the beginning of a second church year that we begin in a virtual sanctuary. Who knew how much we would come to miss those hard wooden seats where we sat shoulder to shoulder? We had thought that we would be able to gather in person this morning, but the virus had other plans, and so we've delayed that day, hopefully not for too long. We had planned to gather in person, those of us who live in the Portland area, I should say, but our community now includes so many of you who live at a distance. Even our definition of who we are as a community has shifted, is shifting. So perhaps there's some rightness in this virtual homecoming, some recognition that assumptions, many of them, about what the church is and about who the church is for, some recognition that our assumptions need to shift too. It's a lot of change to live into. What abides? In what can we trust? It is fundamentally a question of faith, I think, as so much changes around us. Congregant Cindy Comfer, our brilliant resident historian, just presented a history of First Unitarians' engagement with race. She began with the acknowledgement that the first ministers of the church, Thomas Lamb Eliot and his son William Eliot, were deep believers in manifest destiny, believers that European and especially white New England culture was the very apex of civilization, that indigenous folks were far lower in the hierarchy of development. The early leaders of this church believed that they were bringing the benefits of civilization to savages and to a savage land. They did not argue against the lash law. Lashing was the punishment for being black in Oregon, or the Chinese exclusion laws. Hearing that history today, we cringe, all of us. But they believed they were promoting truths that were permanent, ordained by God, in fact, truths that could be relied on. Theodore Parker is one of our most famous Unitarian religious ancestors. He coined that famous phrase that the arc of the universe bends toward justice, that phrase that Dr. King and later President Obama borrowed. Parker harbored fugitive slaves, and he was an ardent abolitionist in his day. The church he served in the 1840s had over 7,000 members. It's the largest church in Boston. He was like a rock star in his day. Perhaps his most famous sermon was titled, "The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity." Remember that the early Unitarians believed that they were perfecting, not rejecting Christianity. The transient and the permanent. Parker's words. What is falsehood in one province passes for truth in another. The heresy of one age is the orthodox belief and only infallible rule of the next. Predestination, the miracle stories of Jesus' birth and resurrection, all were transient for Parker, who had no patience with the arguments over those doctrines in his time. But he was clear on what was permanent. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and all thy mind, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love God, love self, love neighbor. It does not take much translation of those phrases to have them ring true for almost all of us. Love God, love the spirit of life that moves within us and among us. Love self, love those around us, love neighbor. We would, I think, add love the earth, as Julia Griffith so beautifully put it in her testimony. The earth loves us. Now, Parker acknowledged that there were other religious traditions that spoke of those truths in different language. But those truths for him were permanent. They were bedrock. They were real. Parker himself, he was far from perfect. We should stop looking to the heroes of our history for perfection. He was an ardent abolitionist, yes, but he did not believe that black folks were his equal. He was not perfect any more than you or I are perfect. But he got the impulse to love and the power of love. He got that right. This summer in my question and answer sermon, I used the metaphor of the cathedral with many stained glass windows, each one representing a different religious tradition. The light streaming in, looking slightly different depending upon which window you look through. Many windows, one light. Many religious points of view, one abiding truth. UU minister Forrest Church created that metaphor. The cathedral of the world, he called it. And it's a powerful metaphor, suggesting that there really is a common religious impulse, a single light, despite the superficial and the doctrinal differences. That there is something permanent that we can rely on. Despite our disappointment, that the virus is not done with us yet, and despite all of the divisiveness in the world, despite all of the greed and self-serving, despite the anniversary of 9/11 and 2 decades of a failed war on terror, despite the persistence of racism and the refusal to allow women to control their bodies, despite well-heeled public voices against vaccination when all of them have been vaccinated, despite all of the evidence that we live in a broken world, despite it all, hope still burns in our hearts. The vision of a world that can be still inspires us, and we know what we need to do, or at least we know where we need to begin. We know that hope has not betrayed us. Now, that's a faith statement if I ever uttered one. Hope has not betrayed us. And I need to confess that I wasn't sure I could get there today. I have been just as uncertain, just as fearful as you have, that the beloved community was in fact becoming just an idle dream. I was not sure that I could get to hope today. I wasn't sure. When we had to make the decision to delay in-person worship, I wasn't sure how we would show up. Not sure who would be here for this homecoming and what shape our spirits would be in. There's an old saying that great ministers make great congregations, but that it is great congregations that make ministers great. It was you who helped me out. Not being with all of you has been the hardest part of the pandemic for me, but this last week, it was you who helped me get to hope. When our board met last week with Covenant, our spiritual theme, Reverend Tom and I asked the board members what promises they felt called to make today, and how those promises had changed since they joined the church. Here's what they said. They said that their commitment had gotten stronger over time. Commitment to themselves and to this community and to the Spirit stronger over time, they said. They talked about sticking with it even when it has been hard, even now. They spoke of their own spiritual growth, of being first held by this community when they joined, but now doing more of the holding. And they spoke of how holding the big picture, holding the larger hope, how holding that hope helps their individual spirits grow. One member said when they joined this community, they joined a thing that already existed with no idea that it would change. But now they feel in covenant with the community that is yet to become, a community that will develop and grow into the future. Another spoke of nurturing the emerging church that will be the church that will serve and thrive into the future. Of holding leadership now for a short time only, but having faith that the church that needs to emerge will emerge. Faith that what needs to emerge will emerge. And that the covenant, the promise to remain together, to keep bringing our full and most authentic selves even when it gets hard, that was the great gift. I listened, and I was so moved. We belong to each other, as Julia Griffiths said so simply and so beautifully. But I also heard a covenant that was a statement of faith, an embodied statement of faith, as we promise to stick it out, to stay with each other, and to stay open to the church that is always emerging. I heard a promise to keep faith and to hold hope, keeping faith with the radical notion that all evidence to the contrary, love just might be real. And so we are in covenant not just with each other, but with the Spirit of life and of love. And our promise is not to be perfect. Elizabeth Wynne discovered the depth of covenant when she let herself show up hungry, as she said, when she showed her not so shiny side. The promise is not about perfection. The promise is about aspiration. The promise is about creating hope out of the process of our promising. Because it is in living as if love were real that we find ourselves joyous. We find ourselves giving thanks and praise. The beloved community is not an outcome. It's an attitude of possibility that underlines the urgent need for joy. The miracle is that if we are faithful to that covenant, if we act as if love were real, we make it so. The reflection in that board meeting helped me to get my theology back in order. And what a blessing that was. But there was another place I needed to find in my spirit. I was meeting with another group of congregants earlier this week, and they were reflecting on these COVID times, their experiences and how they were doing now, the state of their souls, if you will. And what I heard them say was how much they had learned. What I heard them say was that in these difficult times, they had actually figured some things out. They had figured out what was important to them in their lives and what was not. And they told me that after all these months, they still believed in love and the power of love to liberate and transform. They still believed in love. They told me that they knew what mattered even more deeply. And that is what took my theology down to where it needs to live in my spirit. Because the question is whether it is worth it to care, whether it matters. They still believed in love, and so do I, and so do you, or you wouldn't be here. Oh, you may have real questions in your heart. Many of us do. You may need reassurance and support for your hope from this community. I think we all need that. But you wouldn't be here if you've given up on love. You wouldn't be gathering again if you've given up. Now, it is so true that we need to ask more of ourselves, be more demanding of ourselves. We need to face systemic racism and climate change, reproductive justice and gender liberation, and we need to do that work together. We must dismantle those systems accountably. We don't yet have even an intuitive sense of what that word means, but we glimpse enough of its meaning to know that it requires us to stay open and to keep widening the circle of our concern. Because you see, covenant is a system of caring. Think of covenant as a vessel that holds our capacity to care. And we've learned in these COVID days, and as we live through the current wave of the pandemic, we are impatient, yes. We are concerned for safety for ourselves and for our children, you bet. We know that building toward beloved community will be a huge step. We know all of those things. But we are not overwhelmed. We are not depressed by current reverses, which are real. We are enraged, not depressed. And we will emerge. We are emerging from the pandemic impatient to get on with it. Because we've got this. We've gotten clearer, and we've gotten stronger in our faith. Not faith in outcomes, though we want particular outcomes, but stronger in our faith that we can live into the beloved community with each small act we make, each decision we take, Each time we act out of love, we make love more real. What is permanent, what abides, what we can trust, is the power of love that resides within us and is magnified among us as we expand the circle of our care. And because that love has never broken faith with us, we've got this. On Homecoming Sunday, bring it on. I believe that we are ready. We've got this. Will you pray with me? Spirit of life and of love, in this world of change, may we change for the better. In this world of injustice, may we help justice roll down like waters. In this world of oppression, may we work for liberation. In this world of divisiveness, may we hold our hearts open. And in this world of despair, may our lives speak of both hope and love. We have used this time apart well. We have discovered, to some of our surprise, that the Scriptures got it right. Faith, hope, and love do abide. And the greatest of these is love. And to receive love in our covenant of caring, we receive that love so that hope can live. May that be so. And amen. Let's join in our final hymn, I Know I Can. We are so blessed. We are such blessings to each other. We belong to each other. And we got this. This is the day we have been given. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Go in peace. Practice love. Amen.